Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here. You know, I have been thinking a lot about the upcoming changes to ESO in the Dragonhold patch, really just trying to wrap my mind around what the developers are doing with this game. I know that many of you think they've missed the mark on this specific patch, and I tend to agree with you. So in this video, I want to discuss what they've been doing with the game over the past year, past 2 years, and specifically why I think they're doing it. Now keep in mind that this is just a theory rolling around inside my head right now, but to me it makes sense, and it does actually explain the changes to the game that we are seeing right now. And I'm also going to explain why I think it's misguided and causing the game harm in the long run. So let's start with the why. My theory is that the majority of ESO's development over the past year or two has been focused completely on bringing in new players rather than keeping their existing, more experienced players in the game. I think this is pretty obvious when it comes to like the Dragonhold DLC, as well as Scalebreaker and the Elsewhere chapter. When you look at how combat and abilities have changed in these releases, there's been a huge effort to standardize abilities across the board, making them cost the same and do the same damage. Now, in the mind of a new player, that is probably helpful because, let's be honest, when we started playing the game 4 or 5 years ago, you pretty much needed a PhD in ESO to make sense of all the abilities and the buffs in the game to figure out which was best for your character. It took extensive experimentation and even research online, on forums, on YouTube, to determine the best path of progression. A lot of people, myself included, actually really enjoy that level of theory crafting investigation, but that's a different discussion. So along with the general homogenizing of abilities this past year, we also have things like improved ability, tooltip descriptions, minor and major buff consolidating, even the build helper that's now available in the game, which I never use by the way. All of these aimed at simplifying and improving the game just for the brand new players. All of this shows that there's really this concerted effort, I think, at simplifying the game down from what it was at the start, which again mostly benefits new players coming into the game so that they don't get overwhelmed right away and they have this nice, easy progression getting into the game at the start. So when you think about it, none of these changes really benefit those of us who are experienced ESO players. We know what the skills do already. We know our builds, or we know how to create new ones, and we don't need the game to hold our hand like this. Now, I want you to think for a minute about the kinds of changes that would benefit those of us who played the game for more than a year. Do you have your list in mind? Does it include things like better server performance, better load times, bug fixes, abilities that work, weapons that don't lay on the ground, trial environments that are playable, separate solo and pre-made queues for battlegrounds, queues that even work in the first place? Yep, those are on my list too, and yet those changes continue to be ignored or pushed off into some infinite to-do list or long-term roadmap, or not even get addressed at all, ever. This really shows us the focus of the ESO development cycle, that they primarily work to improve the game for new players coming in, but not for those of us who've been around for years. Now, to be clear, I'm not trying to attack the developers here at all. I'm sure they would love to do more, especially for endgame players in ESO, but I'm really just starting to get at this place where I need to change my expectations for this game. I need to start to understand that the development decisions that they make probably have more to do with things like team size, development budget, and at the end of the day, making money for the publisher. I need to remember this when I think about this game so I don't go crazy. Because as much as we love this game and we know the direction we need it to go as experienced players, it is a business and we need to remember that. We need to understand that the team size, it's not as big as other AAA studios, and therefore Their resources have to focus on certain elements of the game development just by necessity. They can't do everything, so I'm trying to keep that in mind. In terms of making money for the game, I think this is a really interesting discussion as well. And I think the past 2-3 years, we've really seen the shift in their development focus more on making money. Obviously, in developing content for the Crown Store, and then also developing this new chapter release cycle that we're seeing more often. So especially with those new chapters that really lean into our Elder Scrolls nostalgia, like Morrowind and even the Somerset chapter. These really bring in the new players, which of course brings in the monies. So we see this trend of new players coming in when the new chapter releases, small spikes again for these quarterly DLCs, and then another big spike again for the next chapter the following year. You know, it's interesting, there's been this ongoing poll on the ESO forums for probably like 3 years at least. It's the, would you rather have a new DLC or a 100% performance and bug fix patch for the next release? And of course, we know what we would say as experienced players: forget about the new content and fix the game. Take a break from content. We have enough content. Fix the game. But of course, no matter how we vote, that will never happen because new content pushes in new players who are, you know, happily coddled by the new and homogenized systems where every class is the same, and the money comes in with those new players. Performance patches don't make money. That's the next thing that I have to keep in mind. So that's basically the unspoken roadmap as far as I'm concerned. That's the why, that's the development plan of ESO. And I just have to keep that in my mind moving forward because I need to adjust my expectations. New players in this game will always be prioritized over experienced players in terms of ESO's development, in my opinion. That's my theory. So good, bad, you can decide, but I just wanted to throw this out to you guys and see what you think. Now, I do want to highlight a pretty big contradiction coming up in Dragonhold when it comes to this concept of new players first, and tie in this concept of the ability audits that are happening now, these massive sweeping nerfs to skills in the game. The contradiction here is that even though these changes are aimed at improving the game for new players, right? We talked about it, simplify the systems, make it easy to pick up, make it easy to understand on day one, make it easy for the new players. These ability audits, these nerfs are actually going so far at this point that even brand new players to the game are gonna get hurt by this. So I have like a top 3. These are my 3 reasons why this approach is really hurting both new players and experienced players, and the whole game is being affected by it. Number 1, changes are happening too often. Okay, the reoccurring comment that I see, especially in my build videos, is that as soon as a new player settles into the good build, then it gets changed, it gets nerfed. This is frustrating even for the new players now who feel like they're just getting a good grasp on the game, only to have it completely change and slip between their fingers. The changes really need to slow down. Number 2, the dot nerfs hurt newer players most of all. Regardless of how weird a patch Scalebreaker was, it was actually the best patch for new players in a couple of years because dot builds are easy. Okay, dot builds are easy. We saw a big increase in player power in Scalebreaker, in player DPS, and their ability to compete and complete difficult content. Was it a bit too strong? Yes, of course. It needed to be toned back a little bit. But in general, this direction was actually good for new players coming to ESO in 2019. Think about it, they could rotate 3 or 4 dots, work on their rotation, work on keeping up their buffs, and they could actually do good DPS. By nerfing dots now, by nerfing them so hard, you've now forced new players back into a spammable rotation, back into the spammable meta. It forces good light attack weaving, which we know light attack weaving is one of the most difficult things to do in this game, especially for newer players. So your dot nerfs, your dot homogenizing is not good for them. it's going to make the game more difficult for them in the long run. And then number 3, sustain nerfs hurt newer players most of all. So Dragonhold is creating a huge impact on player sustain, especially with AoE dots, which are traditionally, the fundamental pieces of a DPS rotation. Those AoEs now cost 5,000 resources per cast. I don't know why, they just do. It's just 5,000. And we're talking about basic skills like Arrow Barrage, Wall of Lightning, all of these costing 5,000 resources. Why? Sustain is another issue. It's one of the top issues that new players have difficulty with when they're getting introduced to ESO. In their rotation, they're gonna run out of resources after 5 casts. 4 or 5 casts, they're gonna be done. What are new players supposed to do with this? How do they sustain? How does this even make sense? So I'm gonna wrap it up. This has been recorded on Sunday, the day before PTS Week 3, and I'm really hopeful that some of these nerfs will be reduced. I'm hopeful that sustain is gonna improve. I'm hopeful that dots are gonna come back up to a usable level, because like I said, it affects all players at this point. We've gone so far that new players are gonna get hurt, same as us experienced veterans of ESO. So I'm hopeful that there'll be more changes. It is only, week 2 right now. And then again, just moving forward, I think it's important that we get in the right mindset of ZeniMax as developers. They're not focused on things like bug fixes and performance because it's not new content and it doesn't bring in money. So as much as that hurts to understand, just gotta do it. Because ultimately, that's what pays the bills, that's what keeps the doors open, and that's what keeps the game going. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the discussion today. If you did, feel free to drop a like and let me know what you think in the comments section. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you around in the next one.